So today, guys, we are rocking and rolling. So I have a client called by the name of Petroleum Pete, who has come to me regarding his petroleum company. It's a startup. He's looking to get a petroleum exploration license in South Australia to commence the exploration process in search for petroleum within that region. Now, my basically, Pete is looking to gain some clarity into identifying the current competition and gaining the petroleum exploration market, or gauging the petroleum exploration market within this location. Pete, if he is successful in finding petroleum, is looking to sell his lease off to a larger market player in the region and is curious to find out who he should talk to. So he's after two of the bigger players in the petroleum market in terms of that are going in the exploration process. So, with oil, for example, and gas and petroleum, you have players that are in the production phase, players that are in the exploration phase, and then you also have players that are exiting the market that or have already exited the market because they've extracted petroleum from the ground, they've made their money, they're off, and they've moved to another location. There's a lot you can do here in terms of looking at different leases. Each state um, gives out different leases to explore on, and then also to produce petroleum on. So he's just looking for petroleum. He hasn't, got a solution yet to extract it from the ground and or produce. He's just a startup petroleum company that is looking to try and find some petroleum and in his exploration. And if he's successful in doing that, he will sell that off to a larger market player. So, it could be a Beach Energy, for example. It could be an Ellipsis Resources or Elpis Resources, etc. So basically, the questions that Pete has come to me with today that he wants to know is he wants to know what years out of the current active leases had the largest number of areas covered by the current exploration companies. So what leases um, have covered sort of the largest number of areas throughout this sort of historical period out of all the active leaseholders. And then he wants to know which companies have been active throughout the whole past 25 years, and who has been exploring in the South Australian region the longest, who's had the longest leases throughout the last 25 years, and who is still active in the market because he's only interested in active exploration players in the market. He doesn't care about players that have come in 5 years ago that were there for 20 years that have now exited. He just wants to know current market players that or competition that he's going to be up against in his exploration ventures. Which petroleum exploration companies have had the longest active leases throughout the region is the next question. And basically, just on a little bit of a background, I would advise Pete that there are currently 22 petroleum companies, as we can see here in the data set, with 27 active exploration licenses in South Australia, according to the South Australian government site, SA-RIG, with CCS Arkaringa Proprietary Limited having the most at three. So they have three active leases on different sites here, as you can see on the lease numbers. Holloman Petroleum, Bright Petroleum, and Elpis Resources all possessing two, while the rest of the players maintain one lease. So these are our players down here, all the different operators. We can see here that the date granted. I've chucked in a couple of year functions here just to get a year granted column and an expiry year column, and then to further determine here the length of the lease. Out of the operators with the current longest leases, Elpis Resources has been exploring in the region since 2007. These guys have two really long leases of 21 years on each, one in PEL 81 and PEL 253. Okay. If the exploration company wanted a little bit more advice, I would tell them to go to QGIS. You can extract from SA Rig, put it into QGIS, and map out where all the different lease locations are. And you do this through the X and the Y axes here, and you gain the latitude and longitude into mapping software to determine where each competitor sits inside the market. All right. So coming over here to answer his first question, what years out of the current active leases had the largest number of areas covered by the current exploration companies? So we can sort of see here, um, you can sort of see that 2012 was a massive year on the area chart here. So um, we can see up here, 2011 to 2012 was quite a big jump there. That would have been post mining boom or oil price sort of boom. Before we saw that massive drop in the oil price at the sort of 2013 to 14 exploration really sort of started to fall away there. Before like picking up a little bit there in 2015, and then it was sort of slow there for a while. 2016, we saw the oil price drop again, pretty slow. And then, 2018 upwards, we saw a little bit of a push up there. So realistically, over the last, first thing I would be advising is over the last sort of 10 years or so, we haven't seen the strength that we saw in the 10 years prior um, in terms of exploration. So exploration sort of popped off in the area. We've seen a lot of big players sort of stop exploring within this market, which would suggest that a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked off in terms of petroleum, and which makes it probably a bit more of a harder game to find petroleum within that region. So that would be the first thing that I would be advising Pete there. We can sort of see here the total area in kilometers squared. Basically, that's the metric here. Sort of just determine, that's the sheer size of the leases. That's all we're sort of really evaluating on here. How big was that actual lease? So when a company takes out a lease, you take out a certain portion of land, and the size of that land there in kilometers squared, you can sort of see here as a total for each particular year. So that's the combination in terms of all the active players where they were sort of sitting back then. Now, it's not a true representation of what happened because we would also need the historical data based on all the other players that were in that market back in that period that have now exited. But it does sort of seem from this data set that a lot of these guys have been looking around for quite a long time. And to my knowledge, the exploration process can take a number of years. So, next graph we've got here to answer his next questions: which companies have been active throughout the whole last 25 years, and who has been exploring in this region the longest? So, you can sort of see here, these are the operators with the most active exploration leases from 2003 to 2024. So over the last sort of 20 years, um, we've sort of seen CCS, Arkaringa, Proprietary Limited. They've had three active leases consistently throughout this period. Holloman has had two, and Bright Petroleum, Bright Petroleum Proprietary Limited have had two. Uh, Elpis Resources two, and then all the rest of the players there are all situated on one. And we can sort of use the filter over here to then determine, okay, who's had that lease for 23 years? Which player was that? Oh, that's Holloman Proprietary Limited. Okay. Who's been in the game for 21 years? What leases have been going for 21 years? Oh, that's Bass Oil, Cooper Basin, Proprietary Limited, and Elpis Resources. So if you're a starting player, you might try and find a contact or a connection in those companies that has been working there for a long time. Ask them a few questions about sort of the bubbles that they've had and the challenges they've had in the area and the location. To sort of just gain a few little bit of insights there, or even just to uncover a few questions of where they've sort of been looking. And then we can sort of see Strike Energy there. I've been going 16 years more on a particular site. So, because there's only really a few entries in the data set here, it's pretty easy just to filter it in, Strike, and then have a look at what data set that is on. I've left it like this for him, for Pete. Which petroleum exploration companies have had the longest active leases throughout the region? So um, here we can sort of see the operators, the current operators with the longest leases in the market. Um, we know Elpis Resources, 42 years. They've had two leases for 21 years each. Um, and then CCS, 7 years. Polyman, 34 years. And we sort of just have a bit of a look here. Okay, Strike is still in the market here, 16 years on one of their leases. Gold Hydrogen, new player in the market. My knowledge, they were just in hydrogen, not petroleum, but I'll just go off what the data set says here. And so that sort of just gives him a little bit of an idea there, who's been in the market the longest. And then if he wants to sort of go back by year, who entered in 2016. Okay, Polyman entered, another one in 2016. Well, they got granted another lease in that year. And you can go back in 2021, have a bit of a look there. See, we know that the guys at Gold Hydrogen have been there for 3 years or so, entering the market at 2021. And down here, we know Woodillo Energy and H2X South Australia have entered too. So it might be conversations with some other guys there too to identify sort of where they're looking and what their sort of goals are. From startup perspective, there's definitely benefit in dealing with larger operators trying to cut deals, especially if you do find petroleum, you've got to understand it from a logistical standpoint. What sort of facilities are already in place? Usually facilities that are created by the bigger companies that with the capital and the investment to invest in the infrastructure, to build new roads, build gas plants in those and uh, in extraction points within those remote locations. So, yeah, that would be my advice to Petroleum Pete. And thanks for your time listening in today.